In this video, I will be talking about problem 1 in your homework, where we have a company that is being required to pay for the negative externality of its pollution. And so we have a supply and demand schedules, and I'll just jump over here and show it here. And you can see that we have one demand schedule and two supply schedules, one without paying the cost of the pollution and the other with paying cost. So you can see that when they don't have to pay the social cost of the pollution, they're able to produce higher quantities at every price than they are when they actually have to pay this cost. So what they're asking you to do is just graph this schedule, which I have right down here, which I don't think you'd have any problem doing this part of it, but I kind of wanted to look at it and just think about what we're seeing here. So once we graph this, we can see that we have a demand curve that has a fairly steep slope. So we can see that it's fairly inelastic because the steeper the slope, the more inelastic the demand is. So the question is asking, so let's see right here. So it says, does the ultimate cost of taking a social cost into account fall more on the demanders or the consumers, which are the demanders, or the suppliers, or another word of saying that is producers? So who's going to pay for this cost? The consumers or the producers? So how do we figure that out? Well, we've done this before when we looked at taxes. So if we think about this, we can think about this extra cost is just a tax. And what is the cost? Well, if we bring in a vertical line right here, we can see that this quantity where they are at equilibrium before they pay the cost, which is 440, and with the price of 15, we can see that the cost is this, because the cost is increased at this quantity from $15 to 30. So there's a $15 price or cost, I should say, cost increase for every for every unit when they're actually having to pay for their pollution. But the question is, this cost right here, who is paying it? Is it the producer or the consumer? Well, we know that from what we've learned about with taxes, that if the demand curve is more inelastic, then the consumers are going to pay more of their more of the share, I should say, more of the share of this cost. Without doing anything else, we just know that. But let's actually look at what's going on here. So if we look at if we bring in a line here and we say, okay, we want to see where the new quantity crosses the old supply, which is right here, and we want to put a line in right there. Now, this portion right here below the old price and above the line we just put in, that's going to be the portion paid by the producer. And then the area from the old price up to the new price, that's going to be the portion paid by the consumer or demander, which you can easily see that that's going to be a much larger portion. Now, the other interesting thing we can look at is total revenue. So let me move this out of the way and move this out of the way so we can sort of see this. Now, before they had to pay for the pollution, and their demand curve was here, this supply. Sorry, the supply was the private supply curve here. Total revenue was this. So we can just easily do the math and say, okay, we have a price of 15, a quantity of 440, and we can also see that up here when we look at our private, which is without paying our social cost. This is where the quantity is in equilibrium with a price of 15. Okay, so now, we can see that before they've paid this, had to pay this cost, their total revenue was 6,600. Now, what happens when we shift our supply with this very inelastic demand, and we compute the new total revenue, which is here, and that's going to be 30 times 410, which is going to be much higher. So with a very inelastic demand, when you raise the price, you're going to have, and also keep in mind in this scenario, your supply is not overly inelastic. It's closer to a unit elastic. It's not really extreme either way. So with this type of supply curve and a very inelastic demand curve, when the price goes up, you're going to have a larger total revenue, which is going to help the suppliers. So that's one way of looking at it. If you and just to see that, I just wanted you to be able to look at these graphs and see more of what's going on, because you don't really know what they're going to ask on the AP exam. They may ask you about a total revenue, so you want to be able to quickly see what that is. Now, let's just look at one more. This isn't in your problem, but I wanted to look at it just to sort of for fun, and just because you could certainly be asked this. What happens if the demand is more elastic? So let's bring in a more elastic demand curve right here. Put it right in there. So let's say our demand is this curve, which is much more elastic than the curve in the problem. Okay, so now we end up going from here to here. So we have a new price here and a new quantity demanded right here. So if we and I also I extended this private supplies so we could actually do this. So I'm going to stick that back in there, right there. And then if we if we look at where the old supply or the original supply here crosses over the new quantity, which is right here, and then we compare that with the area above the original price and the new price here. Well, from here down is what the producers are going to have to pay, and from here up is what the what the consumers are going to have to pay. So you can see that with a more elastic demand, whoops, here, right? The producers pay a much higher portion of this cost of polluting. And we can also, just to finish this up, we can also look at a total revenue. And remember, a total revenue originally, sorry, was 6,600. And with this more elastic demand, the new total revenue, because we've had a movement in price, the price has gone up, but the quantity demanded has gone substantially down with this more elastic demand. So now our total revenue actually hasn't changed at all. Interestingly, we have the same total revenue. However, the fact that the price went up less than the quantity went down means, because we went from here to here and from here to here. So our quantity, let me just get that out of the way. So the quantity went from, actually let me put that back in because I need it right there. Yeah. So the quantity went from here to here, a huge decrease in quantity demanded, but the price didn't go up as much. So that's why that is. So anyway, I just wanted to show you guys that when you see these graphs, be able to look at them and figure out what's going on with the graph, and also understand what would happen if there was changes that could be. And in your problems or your questions that you may get on the AP exam, you may be asked, what would happen if the demand curve was more elastic, more inelastic, or the supply, or what would happen if they shifted. So you want to be able to sort of sketch that out and see what's going on. Okay.